Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Mindful of You podcast. This is episode 53, Religion and Mental Health. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I hope you're having a great start to 2024. Me personally, I feel like January is just one long eternal month. It can be kind of hard to come back after the holidays and get back into regular routine, but I think regular routine has its place too. So in some ways it's been really nice, other ways it's been difficult. So I am super excited to chat with you about this topic today. I have some nerves surrounding it as well. It's a topic that is difficult to approach because everybody's experience is so individual. I do want to get out of the way right now. I've titled this episode Religion and Mental Health in the sake of being succinct, but I am going to be talking more specifically about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I think that a lot of Christians could probably relate to what I have to share too, but I am going to be speaking directly about those religions and not in a more broad sense. And I know that there are many other religions besides just those few, but for today I'm just going to be addressing the culture and the experience I'm most familiar with. That being said, it's the culture that I'm most familiar with. I do know that everybody has a different experience with the church and with growing up in a religion or converting to a religion. We all come from such different backgrounds, and that's beautiful. But I hope that some of what I share today can be relatable to you and to your specific experiences. I wanted to talk about this because there is a lot of misunderstanding and struggle surrounding a lot of topics in the church that can inadvertently cause our mental health to deteriorate. I know that that was the case for me when I was a missionary, and that has been the case for many people who have left the church or pursued other paths. And I just want to talk about why I personally think that may be, knowing that it's a very complex topic. So the first thing I wanted to chat with you guys about are some of the ways that church culture, specifically in Utah, or the knowledge that we don't have yet can hurt some people's mental health. So I wanted to just mention some of these things briefly and ways that we can maybe address these things or look at these things and maybe feel a little bit better. So some of these things include questions about LGBTQ+ and their place within the church, whether that be you or a family member. This is another complex topic I don't pretend to know a whole lot about. And then we have questions about race and church history, questions about women's place in the church and in church leadership, and then bullying and judgment from other church members or family members. So I put these in their own category because these are things that I don't think are necessarily misunderstandings surrounding the gospel, but rather they're things that inherently are difficult to swallow, difficult to wrap our heads around and understand. I am going to talk about some other things that I think are a little bit more misconceptions and things we can shift our perspective on a little bit and start to feel a little bit better. I didn't put these things in that category for a reason. So ways to maintain our mental health with questions surrounding these difficult topics can be to embrace the uncertainty that surrounds them. It can be easy to dive down the rabbit hole of trying to find certainty, and I'm certainly not trying to tell you not to ask questions or to ask God, but as we learned in our interview with Amanda, these kinds of questions sometimes quickly spiral into being unanswerable or into being really frustrating. And it can be really hard to reconcile that. So one of the best ways to start to see some improvements, at least for me, is to embrace that uncertainty, embrace the unknown of not fully understanding these things, at least not at this time. Look for ways that you can be the change you hope to see. In ward council, in families, and in callings, we can be that person who speaks up surrounding these difficult topics, especially surrounding judgment or bullying that's happening at the ward or the local level. We need to talk about ways that we can uplift and love others, and you might have to be that brave person to stand up and to say something. Remember that God and Jesus Christ are your judge, not other people. So it can be really easy to feel bullied or feel threatened by the people surrounding us. We hope that's not the case. We want to feel uplifted and loved by the people surrounding us. That's the ultimate goal of having these communities, but it doesn't always happen that way, unfortunately. And that's where I think it's important to remember that God and Jesus Christ are our ultimate judge, and that's who we need to care about what they think, not other people. Be willing to not like some things about how things are run, about how things are handled. I think it can feel really uncomfortable to live with that dissonance of not liking something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to leave, or it could mean that you do choose to leave. But I don't want you to make it mean that you have to. It's ultimately your decision, and for me, I found a happier medium in being willing to be unhappy or frustrated by the way some things are within our church culture. And going right alongside of that, be willing to let some things go. Maybe we acknowledge that it's something we don't like and we let it go and don't let it actively frustrate us in our daily lives, and be willing to look at the other things and the wonderful things that the church and the gospel bring into our lives. So I hope any piece of that was at least a little bit helpful to you. I really did just want to talk about some of those bigger topics that I didn't feel like fit into the bulk of what I'm going to be talking about today, because I know that those are major things that can affect people's mental health within religion, specifically within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I thought I would be remiss to not address that. So that being said, the bulk of our episode today is going to be about ways people may misinterpret or misunderstand the gospel that could hurt their mental health. I don't pretend to be an expert in all things the gospel. I do feel that I've always had a good understanding of basic gospel principles, and I can usually readily see where people are going wrong if the gospel is making them feel hurt or afraid rather than uplifted and loved. It's because of this that I wanted to do this podcast episode and talk to those who might feel this way sometimes within the church. I don't expect that this episode will fix that entirely for you, but I want it to get you thinking about what could be different within your experience in the gospel, and how maybe you can change the experience for others as well. We learn all the time in church, especially if you grew up in the church, you've learned since you were little that, the gospel makes us feel good. It makes us feel loved. God loves us. Jesus loves us. But so often there's people walking around not feeling that way, even being a part of this religion. And I think that that's sad, because I want religion and our particular church to be a place that uplifts and to be a place that you do feel loved and that you do feel proud to be. And I think it is that place for many people, but I want it to be that place for even more people. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was equating our desire to be like Jesus with a need to be perfect. There's been a lot of talks about this in general conference, but I bring this one up because it can be really sneaky. I think we all know logically that we can't be perfect, but it kind of stops there. We know it logically, but for some reason, there's still some part of us that's fighting so hard against that and feels that we should be perfect. I don't know the exact reasoning for that, but I know that there's something within me that wants to do everything that every talk says, everything in the scriptures, and everything that God wants from me. And frankly, it's not possible. And it's also a little bit illogical. There's been a lot of things said over the years and how members should act and how we should be. And it's just a lot more than combing through talks and scriptures to see exactly how one should be. Because of that, I just wanted to share that obviously we can't be perfect. But more than that, we're going to be very far from perfect. And I found that the more I strive towards perfection, the more stressed out I feel. I start to get anxious, and that's what turns me to the all or nothing mindset. When I start to feel like the bar is too high, I start to do nothing at all. I start to think, well, I'm never going to be able to do that, so why try? Why do I keep doing this if I'm never going to be good enough? And I know I'm not alone in that. And I think I've just still been learning that that's really not what it's about. Jesus Christ died for us. He died for our sins. He died for all the things that we couldn't do. And I think sometimes people think he died for like the small imperfections, but he died for so much more than that. Like, he has given us everything. And all he asks is that we do try. And I think often we overthink the trying aspect. And that's where we start to get perfectionistic, is, are we trying hard enough? Are we truly doing our best? And I've decided to just answer that question with, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But I do know that when I expect myself to do it all, I often do none of it. And so it's just not a mindset that works for me. So if it's not a mindset that works for you, I really invite you to try to let it go, to try your best to just do what works for you. My goal in this next general conference in a couple of months is to listen to the talks and take all of them a little bit more with a grain of salt. I want to hear what God needs from me in that moment, in that next 6 months. And I want it to be small. I want it to be bit by bit, little by little. And I think with these small changes, we're going to see greater changes across our lifetime. And we can't be it all, and we can't do it all at once. And there's going to be dips, and there's going to be ups and downs. And I'm saying it until I'm blue in the face, because I just know that there's still some people out there who don't believe me, or they're going to go to put it in place and it's going to feel like it hurts or it's confusing to not be doing it all perfectly. But this is something I'm constantly working on. So I would invite you to continue to love yourself and expect imperfection out of yourself. Okay. The number 2 thing is only seeing the judgment / commandment side of God and not the ever loving and ever forgiving side of God. I had the chance to watch almost all of the Bible videos in the past few months. I think I watched all of them that Jesus Christ is actually portrayed in. I think the ones I haven't watched, he is not portrayed in. But what we see there is just consistent forgiving and loving. And he's always spending his time with the people that you'd least expect. He's with sinners. He's with people who need support. He's with people who need love. He's with the humble. And oftentimes those perfectionistic letter of the law people that are portrayed in these films are, they're not spending the time with Jesus, or they don't believe him when he says that it's okay that we're all sinners. And so I think that it's so easy, especially when there's so much information out there as to things we could be doing better, to only see that judgment side and the commandment side, and not remember how kind and how forgiving and loving God is. I I like to tell myself, like, however loving I think God is going to be is probably a million times more than that. And because of that, I was able to find peace and comfort surrounding a lot of the topics that I listed earlier. Because I thought, I think that the hatred and things are often, probably always, the mistakes of men. And that's not coming from God, because the God I know is loving, and he's forgiving, and he wants everybody to be okay. So our next thing is forgetting that the two most important commandments are to love God and to love our neighbor. I remember having a big shift in how I viewed the gospel and how I viewed religion when I realized this. I used to spend a lot of time in judgment of how other people chose to live. And when I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not the judge. Like, Jesus Christ is our judge. It was so freeing for me, because I was like, oh, I don't have to judge. All I have to do is love. Like, I realized I was so lucky that that wasn't my job in this case, that I was allowed to just love people and allowed to just show them, unconditional love, despite however they choose to live their lives. And even realizing that how they choose to live their lives may not be worse or better than how I'm choosing to live mine, because I'm not the judge, so I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand enough to be able to know that. Number 4 is running faster than we have strength and feeling that we can't ever say no. There are a multitude of service opportunities within the church. And this is amazing. I have found a lot of joy within callings, within ministering, and they've been really great for me. At the same time, they've also been really awful for me. Not every calling has been the right fit. Sometimes ministering felt like a burden, or I felt like I took on too much. And I don't believe that God expects us to run faster than we have strength. Again, there's a lot of mixed messaging out there, a lot of mixed opinions on whether we should even be able to, or if we should say no to a calling. But I have found that you know yourself really well, and you are a part of the revelation process. And if there's information that maybe the bishop or whoever is calling you to this doesn't have, maybe you're pregnant and you've been really sick, or maybe you're in school and things are really busy, and maybe you could do it all and it would be great, and maybe you choose to go that route, or maybe you decide this isn't the season for me to be able to handle being Relief Society president. And if that's the case, you have to be the one to speak up, and understand that there doesn't have to be layers of guilt and shame surrounding that decision. However, not everyone else may feel that way. And so there may still be pressure or questions as to why you don't want to accept a certain service opportunity or calling. But you have to know your relationship between you and God. You have to know your relationship with yourself to be able to feel confident in saying no sometimes. I would also invite you to say yes sometimes. The answer doesn't always have to be no. It's just sometimes it's no. I've found that I used to say no, kicking and screaming to ministering. And I actually think it's kind of cool now. I'm not obsessed with it, but I do kind of see the purpose a little bit more now. And for me, it's not something that's become a burden. It's something I actually kind of like. It gives me a chance to get to know people and to have a reason to get to know someone, because I can be occasionally socially awkward. And so to have like a specific reason that I'm talking to somebody feels less scary to me. Like I can say, oh, I'm your minister. Like I'm not just a weirdo. I don't know. So I kind of like it. You may not, and that's okay too. So you ultimately are the one who knows yourself and knows your life. And that's all I'm trying to say. And you're the only one that's going to be able to speak up if it's becoming too much. If you're running faster than you should, than you have strength for. Okay. our number 5 goes along with number 1, which is overthinking after all we can do and doing our best. There's a really great talk called His Grace is Sufficient by Brad Wilcox that talks about this a lot. I'm going to try and keep this as succinct as I can. Nobody really knows what it means to do their best or what it means to do all they can do. So just, again, do your best and do all you can do. Just know that nobody knows exactly where that benchmark is, so don't overthink it. Okay. Number 6 is, and we have one more after this. Number 6 is thinking that we also have to control our spouse and children to ensure the salvation of others. If I've learned anything through my OCD treatment program, it's that control is a total illusion and certainty is a total illusion. We cannot control other people and we can barely influence other people. It is going to be everybody else's decisions as to how they choose to live their lives. We cannot drag somebody down a path that they don't want to be on. And it's not our job to. There is information out there about how it's okay to invite, but not to control. We can't force anybody to do something that they do not want to do. And there's a couple of reasons that this is detrimental. One is because it's going to drive you crazy, and you're going to become really resentful when ultimately the other person resists your control or your nags or just your little questions or your little reminders. But it also takes your eyes completely off of your own paper. So in more trendy words, stay in your lane, worry about yourself. And that's all. It's so scary to embrace the uncertainty of not knowing how other people are going to choose to live their lives or what their path looks like. But it's going to make you feel better and worse to know that you never had any control anyway. The only ways to truly control people are illegal. So all of the little reminders and things, let it go. Let it go and see what happens. Honestly, people tend to surprise you for the better. And if they don't surprise you for the better, that's good information to have anyway. But ultimately, we shouldn't be watching them a whole lot. We should be watching our own paper, keeping our eyes on our own thing and what we need to be doing. That's my little soapbox on that, just because I'm speaking to myself. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about that can hurt our mental health is seeing revelation as a means to stop making our own decisions. I used to get really weird about revelation. I overanalyzed every little feeling and wondered, is that a nudge from the Spirit? Is that a nudge from God? And ultimately, I've had to learn maybe it is and maybe it isn't. But I've found that as I move forward with faith, I'm able to make my own decisions. And I tend to make pretty good ones, I think, for the most part. And so I feel comfortable knowing that as I try to do my best and I try to make decisions that are going to be good for me, good for my family, good for God or whatever else is important to me in my life at the time, that they're usually good decisions. And I think that God supports me in those. He does a good job of guiding me one step at a time. We can't know everything, and just being willing to say, hey, this is what I think is best. Hopefully I'm right. And if not, that's fine too. And I think God knows how to gently redirect us to what is best. Okay, well, I hope that this episode wasn't too much to take in. If anything I said didn't resonate with you or hurt you in any way, I hope that you have the awareness to let it go and do what's going to be best for you. I really love the gospel and I have a strong testimony of Jesus Christ. I just know that at times, the anxiety and the shame that can come from misunderstanding concepts in the gospel or from broader things that are generally hard to understand and that we all have questions about it's hard. And so I wanted to share the mindset shifts and the understandings that I have of the gospel that have helped me to make it a safe place and to make it what I believe it was intended to be. Thank you so much for listening. Next week, we have an interview with McKinley Thomas, my sister-in-law. We're going to be chatting about clothing and body image. I already interviewed her. It was an excellent interview. So definitely make sure you're subscribing or following me so you can hear us chat about that. All right. Thanks so much for listening. Have a good week. Bye-bye.